Darshan ZionSpartan, or Mr. President, thank you for making the time.
I'm excited to do an interview with you.
It's been a while. We haven't talked since, I think, November. And then before that, I interviewed with you with Blitz, I don't know, years ago before that. But yeah, what have you been up to in the last, I guess, 6 months with GG and in life?
That's a loaded question. Yeah, so I played in Academy this most recent split. I think, unfortunately, we didn't make playoffs, but I think whether you've been playing for a long or short time, the most important thing is whether you feel like you're challenging yourself and you're growing. And I still really felt like I was pushing myself to learn and improve. And even though we didn't make playoffs, I'm still pretty happy with the amount that I was able to learn about myself and League of Legends.
Nice. So you're constantly on this path for improvement. Have there been any books recently that you've been kind of, I don't know, have helped you a lot?
Yeah. So I think I talked to you a little bit about the fact that this past 7 or 8 months, something I've been doing a lot more is meditating. So I think starting in August, I started meditating basically every day for at least 20 minutes, sometimes twice a day, and then sometimes I do even longer than that. And so meditation is something that I've been pursuing pretty consistently for the past 6, 7 months, and every single day during the split. Maybe I missed like 3 or 4 days, but for the most part, I was meditating, and I would say that it really helped so many aspects of my life. But I think whenever you're trying to go and peak performance of anything, meditation is going to be something that'll help you, especially in sports.
So what specifically does it help with? Is it communication? Is it clarity of thought, new ideas? Like, how does it help you specifically?
So I've always been, this is a little tangent, but I'll start with that. I've always thought that having quotes would be cool. You know, like whenever people ask you for advice, what would your piece of advice be? And I think what I realized is a lot of information, a lot of advice isn't really applicable to that person's life. You know, so many people are going through different things. They have different interests. They have different experiences. And so it's kind of hard to apply one quote and just say, yeah, this is my life. But one thing that I can definitely say to anybody, if they want to improve their lives, or if they just want, if they want to enjoy their lives more, I would say that skill is reflection. And so I think meditation is one of the deepest forms of introspection that you can have. And being able to kind of see your thoughts, see yourself, see your strengths and your flaws through a kind of more unbiased lens gives you so much more room for clarity of thought. And meditation is just one form of reflection, so it doesn't have to be meditation, but I think meditation helped me see my emotions and my thoughts a lot more. And I think especially in esports, it's very easy for emotions to get into things, and whether you're watching the highest levels of play or not. And so being able to look at things more objectively and being able to see yourself, even more importantly, more objectively, is, I think, one of the best things you can do for your own growth.
Well, I think, when you look back and you reflect at yourself, it is kind of almost you tear yourself down a little bit. Like, you don't always like what you see. But if you're just looking ahead and you're just like, I'm awesome, have that confidence, then you're not building and growing, because I think part of the growth process is like, it's pain, and it is looking at the bad stuff. So how do you find that balance between reflection and looking at yourself critically, but then also building yourself up to move forward?
Mm-hmm. I think, so you asked if I read any books. I've been reading a lot of books, but one book I've been reading is by someone called Tara Brach, and she is been studying like Buddhism and meditation, and she's also been a therapist. And one concept she talks about is radical acceptance. And at the heart of that is kind of, can I accept this moment, or can I accept the situation as it is? And I think it's really easy for us to say something is good or something is bad, right? Like, I'm a pro player who's been playing for 8 years, and now I got demoted to academy. Like, objectively, a lot of people are going to say that's pretty bad. But I think the important thing is to kind of take away all the kind of stories you tell yourself, take away all these conceptions of what is, and just kind of accept things for how they are. And I think that's a really important thing in the learning and growing process of life, is just when things are bad or even when they're good, can you just kind of accept the moment as it is? And I think that allows you to be more critical of yourself in a more like healing and healthy way. And I think that's something that's helped me a lot. And another thing outside of like the element of kind of like meditation Buddhism is just when you're more reflective, you can see the good things that you've been doing, and ultimately it comes back to like, what is your goal? What's your purpose? Like, what's the reason you're doing the things that you're doing every day? And a lot of that, there's another book called Atomic Habits. And when you're trying to make habits or you're trying to become a certain type of person, the best way to do that is through identity-based habits. And that's essentially habits that you're creating because that's the type of person you want to be. If you say, I want to become a singer, right? You just start singing and you're a singer. So if you're doing the things towards the goal or the person you want to be, then you can just look back at that and you can feel good about the progress you're making. You don't have to be like, say you want to be the best singer in the world. You don't have to already become the best singer in the world in one day. That's not how it works. It's taking the small steps every day. And I think a lot of people now in our day and age where things are moving by so fast, we're looking at technology all the time, kind of forget that there's kind of this process to life. With plants, it's you plant the seeds, and then you let them grow, and then you harvest like the fruits, or you harvest the plants. And so I think a lot of people just want to plant and then get their fruits, but you gotta let your plant grow. And so I think being able to enjoy the small steps and the small process to the growth is kind of being the person you want to be or seeing the results you want to be will kind of lead to a lot more joy and make things easier on yourself.
It's this weird dichotomy in which that you've said that you have to accept yourself as is in order to have the chance for change, meaning that you can't just go after change, but rather just be good with who you are now, and then change will come. Is that what you said, something along the lines of that?
I think that's definitely a big aspect of it. There's also this guy named Carl Rogers who is...
The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change.
Exactly, yeah. That's the quote. And so I think that's why I said, going all the way back to the beginning thing, I know I've hit a lot of different points, but ultimately it comes back to the fact that through reflection and being able to see things as they really are, then only can you accept the situation as it is, and then can you move forward. So I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in stories and delusions and things like that. So I think coming back to the present moment or reality is just so important.
Well, I think sometimes that people have a narrative of, as you said, it's like I got, people see as, I got demoted to academy and all these things. But I think a lot of times in life, the things in which that seem it like bad or whatever are disguises for something that's actually really good. And in fact, it's sometimes like the things in which that are conventionally bad or whatever end up being some of the greatest opportunities. So, yeah, talk to me more about the opportunities that you've seen in, I guess, in these last 6 months for you specifically.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to start. The thing about meditation and the thing about reflection, introspection is like I'm still realizing so many things about myself that I didn't even realize before until now, and I'm still realizing about myself. So to talk about everything that changed is just, I could go on and on, but I think it all started with when I got kicked from CLG, and I think I even tweeted like 4 or 5 months down the line that I was kind of grateful that it happened, because I realized like I wasn't really growing. I wasn't really learning as much as I wanted to, and it's really easy to, like, if you're not growing or improving, it can be easy to blame other people or blame other situations and say, if only this was better, if only I had this, if only this person was teaching me more. But I think the best thing you can do for your own improvement and growth is like look at what you can do better. And I think being able to go into academy, being able to take the pressure off myself and being able to see the game for more of what it is, I was able to learn a lot more. And I think that's one of the things that For example, LS, I think he kind of has this persona where he's really polarizing, but I do think at the essence of what he's trying to say, like the learning content itself, I think he does have a lot of good things to teach people. And I've actually learned some from him as well in terms of going back to the roots of League of Legends, going back to what's actually happening and what it means to win. And I think going back to the thing about like narratives and stories, instead of looking at what people told you, instead of looking at what is conventionally true, can you go back to the roots of something? And this is also another reasoning method called reasoning by first principles. There's this blog online where this guy talks about, do you want to be a cook or do you want to be a chef? And I think for a long time in my League of Legends career, I've been a cook, where I kind of just copy other people. I kind of copy what people are playing. I kind of copy what they think about the game. But being a chef is kind of being able to understand why you do what you do, the very base fundamentals of the game, and then creating something unique that's yours. And so I kind of want to be my own chef in League of Legends and understand the game deeply, simply at my own level. And that's the thing about the best teachers, is that one, they can teach a concept in many different ways. And two, the reason they can do that is because they can break things down to the very simple fundamental roots of what it is. And I think League of Legends, the thing about League of Legends is that I don't think there's a great teacher yet. In any region of the game, from what I've seen so far, you see teams doing a lot of questionable like decisions or thoughts. And I think there's still so much. I'm not saying there isn't a good teacher, but I'm saying there's still so much more that can be learned about the game. And so that made me realize that instead of always looking to other people for the answer of what I should do or how I should play, maybe I should take some effort and figure things out for myself. So I think the past 6 or 7 months has been a big period, not only in League of Legends, but for myself, of trying to reason by first principles and figure things out for myself so that I can be the best that I can be.
I think you're in a very unique position as the president of the Players Association, in which that part of your mission is to kind of almost create a holistic guidebook or structure in which that people can kind of help live their best lives while in League, but also for their futures as well. So I think it sounds like that the path that you're on is trailblazing for not only for yourself, but for them, the people in League as a whole. So how have you taken some of those lessons that you've learned and enacted them with the Players Association, helping other players?
Well, I think the whole reason I took upon the Players Association thing is that at the heart of it, I've been playing the game for 8 years, and I kind of know what it's like to be a player without any information and without any help. And I genuinely I didn't do this for publicity. I didn't do this to make money. I just really want to like help players in need, to help them grow, to give them the resources they need, whatever it is to help them succeed. That's the only reason that I did something like this. And so that's kind of my whole purpose for it. And I think the learnings in my life and things like that, I think even before all of this deep period of reflection, I still had that heart to help players. I think it's just helped me become more wise in the sense of doing things instead of just doing actions to do actions, really asking myself like what will help players, like what is effective, and trying to put my time towards that. And we've definitely had a working relationship with Riot. There's other things in the works of like potentially working with mental health organizations and other things to kind of provide just resources that will help players. And of course, we always help players if they need help with legal counseling and things like that. So I think a lot of it, of the Players Association, is kind of just providing that to the players. And I think for steps beyond that, for example, becoming a union and things like that, that will only come in when it makes sense to do that. And right now it doesn't really make sense to do something like that.
And you've seen from the beginning to the end, the worst to the best of changes in League of Legends, specifically for players. So how has that evolution, and has it been an evolution, or has it been like giant spikes of growth followed by a plateau?
Evolution in what sense?
Meaning that you could look at it at a monetary sense of great, we get paid more, or you could look at it in a quality of life in which that we don't have to live in team houses, or just kind of, or that we scrim 5 hours a day instead of 12 hours a day. How have things changed since you started 8 years ago?
I think there's two aspects. I think on the aspects for players, I think so much has changed in terms of quality of life. Like, I live in my own apartment now. We're going to an office. It feels more like, excuse me, a regular job. I lived in gaming houses for the majority of my career, and honestly, I've had some great memories doing that as well. But it's a coming of age. It's a growing up story to have all these gamers moving to apartments and living life more on their own. So the coaching, the infrastructure, like having all these coaches, having all these resources, getting gym memberships, so many like little things. Also the stages, like being able to play in Madison Square Garden. From when I first joined, I remember I was like 17. It was my LCS just started, and I come in and it's this really it's this brick building, and you don't expect, you're like, is this the LCS studio? This looks kind of sketchy. And you go in and it's just a bunch of tables are like crammed together. It's like really cramped, and there's no live crowd. It's just only broadcasting to, like, now we have this weekly, hundreds of people can kind of sit at the crowd. There's plenty of rooms for people. There's plenty of space. And so things have really leveled up in terms of quality of life and infrastructure. I think the one thing that kind of still needs to level up more is the fact that I think players are still getting taken advantage of in certain situations. And I think that's the big thing that I'm hoping that I can continue to improve over time, is players being armed with more knowledge and resources, because I think those are the biggest things, especially knowledge, because I think players end up in a lot of situations that they shouldn't if they just had more information of the situation.
I think a lot of times that it's a give and take, and as long as you're coming from a respectful place, that when you have more behind you, like a union or the Players Association, when people come and ask you for, hey, can you go spend your off day doing this or that, then if it's something in which that you have the choice of, then hold on for 1 second. I think we disconnected. Hold on for 1 second. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
I can hear you now.
So I think a lot of times with players that, like, they get asked to do a lot of things, and their players' time is one of the most valuable things, and part of that is, if players just say no to everything, then the players are kind of like, being a little annoying. But at the same time, if the players are working from morning until night 7 days a week or 6 days a week, and they get 1 day off, and then they get asked to go do stuff on their day off, it's like, you're not trying to be annoying. It's just like, you need a day off. And so how have you been, how is finding the line of being helpful but also respectful to players' time so they don't burn out and they have a normal life?
Now, that's a really hard question to answer. So essentially you want to know, how do you find that balance?
Yeah.
I think the answer right now is there isn't a balance. I think it's kind of, it's hard for players, because, what I realized this split is that I should just use my day off to not play League, because what I've done for the majority of my career is on my day off, I just play like 10 to 12 games of solo queue. And that's a whole nother topic about people thinking that the best way to show you're a hard worker is to spam League of Legends games. But I just found that it's so much more better for my effectiveness for the rest of the week and the quality of practice if I actually use that time off. So in terms of content asks and obligations, I think it makes sense. You have to do it, but I think just trying to be reasonable about it is the important thing. Like, if you're doing content 3 off days in a row and then you don't really have the day off, then I think that's where you're going to run into problems. But I think a couple times a split, if you have to do smaller content asks or something like that comes up, I think it makes sense, and I think trying to find maybe those pockets of time either before the scrim day or after the scrim day would also make things feel better. I think the big thing is just if you have one full day where you can actually just take it off and not have to worry about anything, I think that's what feels good, because it's like, it's not like you have that regular weekend where it's like Friday night, nice, and then you go Saturday and Sunday. Our days off are usually on Mondays and stuff like that, where we're not really hanging out with any of our friends, and it's only one day, so just got to do the best with what you have.
But it's also even, if you have that one day, even if it is just one little thing where it's like, hey, can you just, do this thing for like an hour? Well, like, it's still an hour, and it's not your full off day. And I think they're like, yeah, you need the full off day. So with that, then also with breaks in between splits, they're not really breaks, right? Because they're kind of almost prepped for the next season.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on if you're a winning or losing team, because if you lose, like especially if you don't make playoffs, it's like even an extra couple weeks. The summer break between when summer ends and then spring starts, you basically have, let's see, it ends in like early August, so you'd have like most of August all the way to like December. You're basically having like, you have like 4 or 5 months, kind of like, not all of it is off, but like you have that like a lot of time off, right? But if you're a team that goes to MSI, goes to Worlds, which is what I did 1 year, then you basically have like no time off. And the time between spring and summer, I remember when we went to MSI, it was basically like a week off, and then we had to get back to scrimming, or maybe even only a couple days, because we went all the way to the finals. And then if you go to Worlds, I mean, we didn't make it out of group stages, but if you go to Worlds, then that's like another 2 months because of the boot camp and going to Worlds. And then if you're starting early again in next split, like I know some teams before, like Cloud9, start like in November and do boot camps and stuff like that. Sometimes the players do it on their own accord, but then you're only having like a couple weeks to a month off. And so it's really, for some player, like different players will tell you different things, right? Like some players will say, oh, like I just want the split to start. Like I had more than enough time. And other players are like, I wish I had a longer break. This is crazy. And I mean, I've been on both sides of the coin, so I know exactly how it can feel for all the different players. And it's kind of hard to find a solution that works for everyone, because you can't.
So part of that is also the day-to-day and the week-to-week. And part of that is how much did you guys push in order to make sure that you guys have 5-hour not work days, that sounds 5-hour scrim blocks, as opposed to like 10-hour, all day like it was before?
I think so. The PA kind of, I wouldn't say it was only due to the PA's efforts, but it was something that the executive committee brought up, that the scrim schedule that we use for playoffs was a lot better and easier to manage and just more effective. And it kind of made a lot of sense, because the old schedule was you do 3 games and then you take an hour break and then you do 3 more games, as opposed to the new schedule, which is just 5 games straight up. And I think that saves a lot of time, because you're just cutting out that lunch break and you're cutting out the extra game and just doing it straight away. So you kind of get on average like an extra 2 hours a day, which really adds up over a season long. And so I think it was something that EU also was already doing the same model. So there's kind of a lot of reasons, and we already do the model during playoffs time. We just didn't do it during the regular season. So it kind of just made sense for a lot of reasons to do that model, and all the coaches and orgs basically just said yes. Like nobody had any problems with it. So it's kind of just an easy change that can't really take too much credit for, because I think everyone in the space kind of realized that it was a good change. So I'm happy that we could do that, and I think all the players and everyone is a lot happier with the change.
So what is your ideal scenario if you got to make all the changes you wanted on a holistic level? What would a day look like for you or a player in LCS, and how close are we to that?
I think we're still far. I think Again, how I mentioned with like the reasoning from first principles of like deeply understanding what's effective in League of Legends, looking at it from like an organizational standpoint, the question you'd have to ask yourself is like, what is the best kind of structure to like have my players succeed? And I think everyone asks themselves that question, but the conclusions they come to, I think, are vastly different. And I think one of the premises that kind of leads to those false conclusions is the fact of practicing the game. There's some orgs that kind of require a number of solo queue games per week, and I think a lot of common like perception is that playing the game like 12 to 16 hours a day, like a lot of Korean players do, and even like NA and EU players do, is kind of what you need to do. You need to be spamming solo queue. You have to be like practicing the game and always playing, and that's how you do it. And I can tell you from personal experience that that cannot be farther from the truth. And a lot of people in conventional sports, I mean, there's the physical limitation of how much you can practice, and there isn't that in esports, right? But imagine you're an 80 carry player, right? You only need to play 6 champions to the highest level. Does playing the like 10,000th game of Ezreal make you that much better at Ezreal that you will like get so much better? And the answer is no, right? I think when you're practicing, there should be some type of purpose or reason to it, and you shouldn't just be mindlessly grinding games. And I think that's kind of one of the big misconceptions in terms of practice efficiency, is that it's a lot about like number of games and grinding, whereas I think the thought should come from like, how can I have effective, meaningful practice? And that's why I kind of I've been trying to, I'm not saying I'm perfect either, right? Like I've had that thought process. I'm like, I gotta go, I gotta grind. And like, I've still, like, I probably still play the game like a lot more than your average pro. And I know that I'm making that change towards more like thought-oriented, effective, like goal-oriented practice. And I understand that it's not only about playing the game, right? There's so much of watching tape. There's so much of taking care of your mind. There's so much of like taking care of your body, the things that go out of the game, and reflection and things like that are very important to like hone your skill and hone your craft at peak performance. Because when I think about peak performance in anything, whether it's League of Legends, singing, sports, basketball, anything, when you get to that top 1 like percent of your craft, like making the difference isn't pushing so hard on the craft. It's realizing that there's kind of a holistic thing around the craft, and that's you. To get to the top, you have to look at yourself and say, what are my flaws? What are my failings? And improve those to really get the best that you can. And that's kind of what I realized. And so I think ultimately a lot of the orgs don't have that holistic view, which in my opinion is the most effective way to train up a player. And not only on top of that, I think a lot of orgs don't have the highly specialized knowledge in League of Legends to be able to take a new green player and make them an elite player. And so a lot of people ask the question of like NA talent, or like, why isn't there NA talent? I think a big reason there isn't NA talent is because they're not being taught how to do that. They're not being taught how to reach those highs. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm hopeful that as time goes and as people learn more about the game, that will happen. And I definitely want to teach a lot of the things I've learned, but I'm a competitor right now, so I'm going to have to wait until I stop competing to teach all of those things. But yeah, I think there's a long ways to go in terms of the teaching aspect of the game and how orgs look at the game and want to build up their infrastructure. So I think things like mindfulness and things like exercise, those things are being implemented more, but I think they're not to the level that they could be. And going to the individuals and really helping them at an individual level, I think that isn't there yet, because everyone isn't the same. You can't just stick everyone under the same exercise or like mental health program. You really need to individualize these things. And I would say that we're taking the steps there, but I think we're still a long way to go. But I'm hopeful that it can improve. And I really do think that this is one of the ways that NA can get an edge, is if they really take that infrastructure and teach players the right way to grow.
what orgs or individuals are helping grow players more than others?
Whew. If I could answer that question honestly, I could, but I don't know enough about like what each org does. Like I've heard things from players and I've heard like things here and there. I don't know enough about the orgs to say it for a fact, but I would say that I'm very highly certain just from what I've seen of like strategy and macro wise and how teams are playing is that in terms of like league understanding and strategy understanding of the game and how the game's being taught, I think there's still a lot that like every org could improve on that aspect.
Okay. Karaoke. Have you been doing your karaoke stream at all?
No, I haven't been doing that. I have a singing lesson coming up this weekend. I'm still singing when I can, but that's something I need to do. I definitely do need to make more covers. I think part of the reason I learned this from Reflection too, right? Like part of the reason I made covers was like it's cool to have like people like look at your singing and be like, wow, this is great. I love this. But I think more of my passion for singing is just like I just love singing all the time. Like I truly enjoy it. It just makes me happy. And so like being able to improve on singing on my own and just enjoy singing for the sake of it is like kind of more of a motivation than just like posting it. But I definitely do want to show like my fans that because when I look at my videos now, it's been a while. Like I definitely wasn't that good at singing and I've gotten a lot better. So I do want to share that. So maybe I will upload something.
Do you think it's important to have hobbies that don't involve competition, but rather they're just stupid and they're just fun? Or do you find that even your hobbies are also kind of almost this competitiveness or like need to be the best at something?
Whew. Well, what I will say is everyone should find their own answer. My answer is I think it's good to have both. I think it's good to take things easy and take yourself like be able to like joke with yourself and be able to like enjoy life a little bit more because I think that's part of what it's all about. And I'm definitely like as you say that, like I know I'm at fault of that because I'm always trying to find like improvement or find growth or like find reflection and like anything I can. And so even singing, right? So like being able to just like relax and enjoy something is such an important skill to have. And so I'm definitely trying to like incorporate more of that in my life.
Nice. So you spent the majority of your career in CLG. Talk to me about that process. And CLG is one of the OG teams. Talk to me about that. That experience of 4 years in CLG.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I really don't know where to start with this one. To boil four years down like that is really hard without like a directed question, but I think
mean, you don't have to boil it down. I guess my thought is like, you talk about in different experiences that they're good or bad, but you learn from them. So I guess then to boil it down is, what did you learn from your 4 years at CLG?
That's also really hard to boil down, but I think I mean, I you know how I mentioned like reflection is the best skill? I think when you ask me that question, something that comes to mind is the fact that like the things that I learned at CLG, when I look back at them now, I learned something different about myself because I'm looking at it with a new lens or I'm looking at it from a new perspective. But I think it's funny because I have this notebook and through the years at CLG, I'd always write down like, these are the habits I want to build. These are the things that I want to get better at. And I think for like a lot of my time at CLG, I would keep doing that, right? Like it was a habit I had where I would get really motivated during like an off season or time off and I'd write down the habits and it'd always be the same thing. Like I want to start meditating. I want to do this. Like I want to like do that. And then like, it was like 5 or 6 times where like, it would be the same thing. I'd write down the list and it'd be all the same things that I want to keep doing. And I think it was disheartening because it was like, wait, do I just like keep getting motivated to say I want to do all these things and then not do any of them? But when I look back at them now and I look at the list, almost all the things that I've written down are things that I've gotten a lot better at. So it's funny for the longest time. Like, I wouldn't say it's delusion, but like the fact that like I was always motivated and wanted to accomplish these things, and the fact that I'm finally doing them now and improving at them feels so much better. I think so. I think if you asked me like what I learned from my time at CLG right when I left and the time, what I think now, it would be completely different answers. And also the fact that when I think of CLG, there's so many different memories and so many different teams and so many different situations. You know, like when I first joined, I was playing with Link and Doublelift and Afro, and that was a really interesting team dynamic. And I also had Smithy, and we had our first split where kind of I think we didn't make playoffs, or we lost in our first round in playoffs, and the way we handled things was really toxic and not good. And then I think the following split, I think we got Pobe, right? We got Pobe, and then we won Summer Split, and me having that heartfelt interview and like having that kind of euphoria of the moment of winning the split, and then going to Worlds and having the issues with Smithy's visa where he couldn't play, and then we had to like have Huhi jungle in scrims, and people weren't happy with that. And then we got one game from making it away in groups, and we didn't make it out. And I think one of our coaches at the time really didn't understand peak performance, because he tilted the shit out of Peter before one of our games. And there's just so many so many memories that come to mind. And I think you asked me like what I learned, right? I think what I realized from all my time now, if you ask me the question, is that there's so many things that I was doing, and there's a lot of the ways in which I was doing things and a lot of ways I was thinking about the game just weren't optimal. And so instead, now I'm trying to view the game from a much different lens, and I'm trying to view myself and the way I spend my time from a much different lens, especially in terms of the game. If you ask me like right after I left CLG, what did I learn? I think the quote that I kept saying to myself, like after I got kicked, was, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And it was something that I felt really strongly about, because it's like, I've been playing this game for so long. I've been pursuing like peak performance in this game for so long and striving to be the best. What am I not changing? What am I still doing the same? How can I like be different? And I think that's kind of ultimately what led me here. But yeah, when I think about my time on CLG, there was so much and so many aspects that were happy and sad and great learning experiences. You know, going to the 2 Korea boot camps, going to MSI and almost winning. And even when we got 3-0'd, people like telling me, like, I remember Kreppel like walking up and it's like, nobody seriously thought you guys were going to win that series anyways. And like things like all the good and the bad. And it was just such a great roller coaster experience that, you know, I was happy to win 2 splits, go to Worlds twice, all of that stuff. I definitely wouldn't take it back.
You talk about in your journal that you wrote that you wanted to meditate more, which was one of the main things, and I'm sure like exercise as well, and just all these things are not necessarily milestones, but more of daily activities in which, in order to be your best self from moment to moment. And I think that seems like the more effective tool I think success is a byproduct of that. So is that what you believe, is that by having these daily habits that allow you to be the best version of you from moment to moment will then allow for a byproduct of success?
It's funny you say that, because there's another book I've been reading called The Slight Edge. And it's exactly that principle. Like every single day that you're living, you either have a positive growth trend or a negative growth trend. And the decision is completely up to you, and it just comes down to the small things that you're doing every day. And that's called The Slight Edge, which is the title of the book. And essentially it's the best way to like look at improvement or growth in your life is starting with the small things and just implementing them slowly every single day. And a lot of people want the quick fix or the quick change or the improvement now. But the thing about the slight edge is that it's kind of an exponential curve. And, you know, like a few weeks, a month, 2 months, maybe you notice like a slight positive change. But 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, you're at that point and you look back and you realize that so much has changed. And it's not really talked about. I mean, it's kind of like known, but it's not really talked about that much because it's not really pretty. You know, it's not like this quick fix to kind of solve all of your emotional baggage or solve all your problems or get to where you want to be. But it's kind of, that's why a lot of people talk about the process and talk about doing the small things, because ultimately that's what adds up to being something great or doing something greater. And so that's why when I look at myself and what I want to do, it's not about making some huge gargantuan effort, but about like, what am I doing right now? What am I doing today? Like, can I just take a walk? Can I start with a walk? And then like a couple weeks from now, like I'll do like a half-mile run. And then like a month from now, I'm running a mile. And like eventually it just becomes so much easier. And I think taking those small steps is kind of a huge part of peak performance, and having that growth is kind of, you want to be on the positive trend. Like you want your life to be on the positive exponential curve. You don't want to be on the negative exponential curve. So I think a lot of it is looking at the little things that you're doing, and there's no rush. You don't need to change everything. Just start with something small, you know, like maybe instead of drinking a soda every day, you start drinking a LaCroix. And then a year from now, that makes a huge change in your health.
The weird part about that is that that I think works for life, because you want 1% growth every day for the rest of your life, because that's then compounded exponentially. But when it comes to a competition like League of Legends, you have one split, 4 months to be able to, you know, make big changes, advances, which then kind of goes to show of within those 4 months is, do you actually see that much growth, or is it more of it just shows where you and the rest of your team are at?
It's a great question. I think, especially with the pressure of sports and the pressure of wanting to perform, it's even harder to have this mindset, because you want to see the results now, you want to win, and you want to do whatever it takes. And so I think it's easy to kind of get lost in like what your goal is. And so like, that's why, like, of course I want to win and I want to succeed, but ultimately for me, like the number one thing I'm focused on is the process and the journey. And an example I used years ago, but it's kind of apt now, is imagine I'm like, there's a bar and like I'm this good, right? And then imagine, I'll put it lower here. And then imagine like there's Faker, right? And he's like right here. That's like a pretty big gap, right? But instead of like looking at how big the bar is, what I should be looking at is like the rate of improvement, and say like Faker is like improving like this much with the things he's doing, but like, or like, let's say Faker's improving this much, but like I'm improving like this much, like a little bit more. Like maybe at the end of the split, like I'm not quite there yet, right? But a year passes, 2 years pass, and then not only did I catch up to Faker, but I'm better than him, because it's not about where the bar is right now, right? It's about that rate of growth and that rate of improvement. And if you have a greater rate of growth than everyone else, then you'll be the best eventually. So I think it's really important to just focus on the process and focus on making sure you're doing things right every day, because you're going to lose your sanity trying to win every single game or win every single moment. Because I think that's a big lesson I had for myself, because I think that's something that I realized is being called to try hard, right? Or being like trying too hard. That's like another aspect of putting too much of yourself inefficiently or unnecessarily. And that was a big thing I learned from reflection and meditation, is that I don't want to just delude myself into believing that I'm being effective or I'm doing everything that I need to be doing better. Like I want to actually do things that are helping me. And I want to actually do things that are helping my teammates. I don't want to just believe that I'm doing that, or like put in effort, but not actually have any result. So I think being able to put in effort efficiently and like effectively is a very important aspect of peak performance. And when you kind of focus on extraneous things like we need to win this game or I need to have this result, then you kind of lose sight of what's important. And especially when the structure that you're kind of learning as a team or the structure that you're trying to improve yourself is faulty, then it's really easy to get stuck in these ruts where you're not really focusing on what's important or what matters, in my opinion. And so that's kind of why I mentioned like the whole org side and the coaching side could be really improved to kind of let players relax and kind of feel like they're taking the slight edge. Like they're taking the slight edge. They don't need to do anything else but what they're doing every day. And I think when you can get to that point in your life, that's when things feel a lot better. And I definitely feel like I'm going towards that trend, which makes things a lot nicer for me.
A controversial thought, though, is that with physical sports, unless you're 6'7", you're not going to be the guy who's 5'6" in basketball. Like there are just certain limitations. And so for League of Legends, in which that esports is supposed to be the great equalizer of saying, oh, anyone can perform at that high level. But first off, you have simple brain activity of, I think at 25, your brain starts to stop forming new neural connections, or at least at the same rate, or something like that. But the idea is, or I guess my question to you is that, are there people who are just wired optimally for this, or built a certain way, in a way that just gives them a natural advantage on top of doing that growth all the time?
I think that there's definitely people who have an advantage, or some people who are just like more like talented, like they play it and they're already good based on whatever, like maybe they played other games, they've always been good at these kinds of games, whatever it is. But I do think that a lot of what even the most elite players do is really achievable if you're learning the correct way. And I'm not saying that like a bronze player is going to reach Faker's level in like 6 months if he does everything right. But I do think that, again, like with time, depending on how big the gap in skill is, if you're doing and learning the right things every day, eventually you will reach that point. And does age play a factor? Do these things play a factor? I'm not exactly sure to what extent it does, but personally, I'm 25 now, and I was 17 when I started playing. I'm way better, even mechanically, than I was then, and it's not just like an age thing, it's understanding like what to do right. Like I didn't understand, like I was clicking like once a second when I was like season 2 probably. Like I was clicking really slow back then, and I had the slowest mouse sensitivity, right? And I think a lot of these things with like having fast reaction speeds and training your mouse speed and things like that, those can be trained, those can be learned. And yes, some players are better at it more naturally and might have more talent per se, but again, like through time, a lot of these things can be trained. So I'm pretty confident in that.
I think I was talking to Delicious Milk, one of our TFT players, and he was talking about the way his mind works, and he's like, it's all about gambling for him, where it is like this number is like it's algorithmic. It's constantly in that world, and so for him and the way his brain works, he's just naturally inclined to be able to kind of really master that game quickly, especially when new patches come out. So I think that's what I'm kind of getting at, is that for League it's a little bit tricky, because it seems to me that the skills that are most valuable, especially like right now, is like mechanics almost seem like a given. Like you just simply have to know the mechanics at a level in which that you don't think about it, it's just there. But then it's more of communication, interpersonal skills, of being able to communicate but also keep a level head, which is then where the meditation comes in. So then I guess my question is, if you were to make a pie chart, what attributes are most important for a League player? And because it seems like increasingly it is communication and relations between players.
I think you can't discount the fact that in any team environment, that's so important. Like I think TFT isn't a team game, right? It's just about the individual player. So I think that's definitely something that comes in, not only in terms of actually playing the game, but remember how I was talking about growth and things like that? A lot of that comes down to the team environment and comes down to how people are interacting with each other and how people are learning together and confronting each other. And that is huge. Like, the learning environment is happening every day. And if you're not able to be unified towards the same goal, then you're not really going anywhere, are you? So I think that's kind of like an undefined, like, that's always important, right? I can't really quantify how important that is, but it's incredibly important. And I think another aspect that's really important is understanding. And that's something that I've been trying to expand my understanding of, because for so long I've been focused on top lane. Like, this is what's good for me in top lane. This is what's bad for me in top lane. In the draft, this is like when it's good for me to pick this. This is when it's bad. But I didn't have as deep of understanding of every other role. And I think that's something that is really, really critical for players to have. You mentioned communication. Having that understanding to properly communicate like the win conditions, or to properly communicate how and what to draft, is so important, because if you just understand things from your own perspective, from top lane or mid lane or jungle, then you're not accounting for the whole picture. And I think that's another issue of like learning and coaching, is I think you're not really taught the whole perspective. You're not really taught mid lane, bot lane, jungle perspective. That's kind of something you ask. And that's kind of something that you figure out from your teammates. But I think that that's something that needs to be learned, because having the understanding in the game is so important. Because if you're only focused on your own role in the game, then you're not always focused on the right thing. So say, for example, you're playing bot lane and you're 0-3, and you really don't want to play the game anymore because you feel like you can't do anything. But if you look at the team comps, you see that top lane is really good into their team comp, because he's Gangplank and they're all really low range and they have to come in. And so you can still play off the Gangplank, and even if you're behind, the top lane has more impact in the game. But if you don't have that understanding, not only do you not know what to do in the game, but emotionally you're more affected because you're so focused on your own situation, and you're not able to focus on the game itself. And so I think that's a really powerful thing, like not only understanding the game, but understanding outside of your own role is such an important thing to be taught. And so I think you mentioned the communication and the kind of team aspect. I think understanding is another big aspect. That awareness and reflection is another big thing that we talked about. And then just the fine like motor skills, mechanical skills themselves of mouse speed, skill shot accuracy. I think having that conceptual mechanical understanding of how situations should be played out is also important. So there's, I think, all those different aspects that kind of play in, and we could talk about other things too, but I think those are, you could leave it at that.
So for learning new things, what's the last thing that you taught your dad or your dad taught you?
Last thing I taught my dad. I've been trying to get my dad to exercise more every time I go home. I think that's the big thing. I taught him a little bit about, I think, that and singing, because my dad, he's trying to become a Bollywood star. So I'm not going to tell you guys his YouTube channel, but he loves singing in Hindi and Gujarati. And he's got this whole channel where he posts like, he takes like Indian poems and kind of just like turns them into songs and stuff like that, and writes his own songs. And he hasn't really learned like how to sing from a teacher, but he loves belting at the top of his lungs. He's really great at that. And so, yeah, I think I talked to my dad a little bit about singing and exercising.
That's pretty cool. So we're about to wrap up. I covered about 20% of the things that I wrote up for you, so which is pretty good. But I'm going to end on something that's a little stupid. I like it because I like Inside the Actor Studio. So this is the James Lipton Inside the Actor Studio questionnaire. So just rapid fire. What is your least? Okay. What is your favorite word?
Donut.
What is your least favorite word?
Eerie.
What turns you on?
Pentakills.
What turns you off?
My jungler ganking bot.
What sound or noise do you love?
Whistling.
What sound or noise do you hate?
It's like that sound that makes you feel like you need to like scratch yourself. Oh wait, actually, this just came to the top of my mind. It's my bed is randomly creaking in the middle of the night, and it's just making me lose my mind.
You should get that fixed. What is your favorite curse word?
Bollocks.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Singing.
That was the right answer. What profession would you not like to do?
Honestly, I'm open to trying everything at least once.
All right. I'll get back to you on that one. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Say that again.
If heaven exists, what would you like God to say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
This isn't it.
Well, Darshan ZionSpartan, Mr. President, this isn't it. I still have many more questions, but for today it is. Thank you for making the time, and have a good rest of your day.
Likewise.
And we are done streaming.